everyone, welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video is lesson 11 in our Back to Crochet Basics. Now in the last lesson we learned how to do a front post double crochet, and we made these fun little button bowls. You can put anything you want in them, stitch markers, jewelry, whatever you want. They were just a fun little button bowl. And you can see there that we made those front post double crochets. In today's video, we're going to be doing front post double crochets again, but we're going to add those back post double crochets also. And we're going to make this little washcloth. It's a great size for scrubbing your face, or maybe for a baby, but it's a fun way also to practice front post and back post stitches. All of the Back to Crochet Basic lessons are all done in American Stitches and Techniques. And also, all of the lessons have two portions. At the beginning of the video, we have what I call the lesson portion, and that's where I demonstrate what we're going to learn that day. And then after we've done that, there is a next portion, which I call the practice portion, or the practice project portion, and that's where we're going to make a project like this one to practice what we've learned. Now, every one of the Back to Crochet Basics lessons have a blog that corresponds with the video, and you'll also find the pattern that we're going to use for our project on that blog as well. And you can find that blog down in the notes underneath this video. You're going to need cotton yarn. Now in the previous lessons, we've used acrylic yarn, worsted weight number 4. But for today's lesson, we're going to be using cotton yarn. And you can see I have sugar and cream here. You can use any cotton yarn that you would like. Now I'm going to be using a solid because the stitches that we're going to be practicing can be a little bit complicated until you're used to them. And I really recommend that you stick with a solid until you feel more confident with your crochet for this lesson. We're going to be using an H hook today, and our H hook is a 5mm H hook, and that's all you're going to need for the lesson portion of this video. Alrighty, let's get started with our lesson. I'm going to begin with a slip knot, and then I'm going to chain about 10 chains. Now, if you have not crocheted with cotton yarn before, you'll notice that it is a little bit different than acrylic yarn. Of course, it's made out of something different. It's made out of cotton. But also you'll notice that the yarn itself is not as stretchy as acrylic yarn is. You'll get a stretch by the stitches that we do, but it's really not a very stretchy yarn. So you want to keep that in mind for any future projects that you might want to do out of cotton yarn. All right, so I chained some chains, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch a row of double crochets to get us started. So my first 3 chains will count as a double crochet, and I'll double crochet in the 4th. And then I will double crochet across. And this just gives us a nice foundation to practice on, or to learn on, because we're in our learning portion right now. All right, looks like I got 2 more chains. Alrighty, so I've done a row of double crochets on that chain that we made. All right, let's chain 3. And we're going to say in this pattern that our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. Now every pattern's different, and they may have a reason they're not counting that, or they may not have you do a chain 3. For our practice and for our learning, we're going to consider our chain 3 as our first double crochet. Now last lesson we learned how to do a front post double crochet. So first I'm going to just stitch another regular double crochet in the next stitch. All right, now I'm going to stitch a front post double crochet in the next stitch. And so I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to go around the post of the stitch, yarn over, pull it through, and then we're going to do 2 and 2. All right, so that's my front post. Let's stitch another one right next to it. So there's 2 front post stitches together. All right, so today we're going to learn about back posts. And when you're stitching front posts, you're stitching on the front of your work. But we're going to stitch a back post. So what we'll do is we'll turn our work, we'll yarn over, and this part, it can be a little clumsy until you get used to it. And we're going to again go through the post of the stitch, but we're on the back side of our work. Yarn over, pull it through, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. All right, so let's look at what we just did. There's our 2 front post stitches, and our back post stitch is on that side. Okay, it's on the back. And it looks the same as the front post, it's only on the back. All right, let's do another back post stitch. Yarn over. We're going to go to the back of our work and go around the post. Pull up a loop. Yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. So now we have 2 front post stitches and 2 back post. I'm going to go ahead and just put 1 double crochet in those last 2 stitches just so that it will lay flat and we can take a look at it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and chain 3. All right, so let's take a look at what we just did. We did 2 regular double crochets first. We have our chain 3 and our double crochet. Then we stitched 2 front posts on the front of our work, working in the post of the stitch. Then we did 2 back posts, going through the post of the stitch on the back of our work. And then we finished with 2 regular double crochets. And you can see it makes a really nice texture. All right, let's go ahead and do another row on our practice piece here. Our chain 3 counts as 1 double crochet. We're going to stitch 1 double crochet in that first double crochet. All right, so now we're to our 2 front posts. So we're just going to stitch a double crochet around that front post double crochet. And we'll do the same in the next front post double crochet. So now we've stitched 2 front post double crochets. Alrighty, so now we want to stitch 2 back post double crochets. So we'll turn our work a little bit over. We'll go around that post, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. There's our back post double crochet again, and we'll do it again in the next one. Here, I'll do it nice and slow. There we go. And just to finish off this row, we'll just put 1 double crochet in the last 2. 1 and 2. And that is the difference between a front post and a back post. You're doing a similar stitch. You're still doing double crochets. It's just where you're putting them. And the front post, we're putting in the front post of the double crochet stitch. And the back post, we're putting our double crochets in the post of the back of the stitch. And that gives you a nice texture. All right, are you ready for our practice project? I think you are. To begin our practice washcloth, we're going to start with our slip knot, and then we're going to chain 16 chains. And for these 16 chains, you need to chain them just a little bit loose, or you'll end up with a pucker on one side of your washcloth. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right, so we need 16 chains loosely chained, not droopy, but not too tight. All righty, we're going to begin by making a row of double crochets. Our first 3 chains count as our first double crochet. So we're going to double crochet in the 4th chain. And then we're going to double crochet in each chain across. So the name of this technique that we are doing for our washcloth is called a basket weave stitch. And it's because that it looks like the weaving of a wicker basket. All right, couple more double crochets. All right, let's chain 3 and turn our work. Now, again, the chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to put a double crochet in the next stitch. For the remainder of the row, we're going to stitch 2 front post, 2 back post, and repeat across. All right, so yarn over, we'll go through the post of the front and stitch our double crochet. The next front post and stitch our double crochet. Now we'll go to the back post. Here's our next 2 stitches. We're going to do those on the back. There's 1. And there's 2. So we stitch 2 front post and 2 back post. Now we'll do 2 front post. This is one of those stitch techniques that looks complicated, but once you wrap your head around it, it's really quite simple. Two front posts, 2 back posts, 2 front post, 2 back post. Now we're going to stitch 2 front posts. And stitch 1 double crochet in the last 2 stitches. And of course our last stitch is the top of that chain 3 from the previous row. And chain 3. And see how that looks? All right, let's turn our work. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We'll double crochet in the next stitch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put 2 back posts in the back post, front post in the front post, back, front, back, front. All right, so we're going to go to the back and put a stitch in that back post. Then we'll put a stitch in the next back post. And now we're going to stitch 2 front posts in the one in each of the next 2. All right, 2 back posts. Two front posts. Two back posts. And then 1 double crochet in those last 2. Let's go ahead and make our chain 3 and take a look at it. See? This is the side where we had the 2 on the back, and if you turn it over, you have 3 on the front. All right, so we're going to turn our work. And now we're going to do the opposite of what we've been doing. We'll go ahead and stitch our double crochet in the next double crochet. And now, where we have these 2 front post stitches, we're actually going to stitch 2 back posts in those. Yarn over, go around the back, pull up your loop, yarn over, and finish that double crochet, and we'll do that in the next one. And what we're doing is we're stitching our back posts in our front posts. And see how it makes a little line across there? All right. So now we're to the 2 that were stitched on the back. And we're actually going to go around those and stitch 1 front post in each one. 1 and 2. Now we're going to go to the next 2 and we're going to stitch back posts in those. Yarn over, go to the back. There we go. I'll pull that loop through. And now we'll do the next one. And this is what gives us that basket weave look, because we've got our double crochet front posts up next to our double crochet back posts, and it makes a nice weave. All right, so we're to the next 2 stitches. Those were front posts on this side. See on that when we had it the other way, those were front posts. Okay, so now we're going to stitch front posts in those. Alrighty, now we're to the last 2 here of our front posts on this side, and we're going to stitch back posts on that side. There we go. And now we'll just stitch a double crochet in the last 2. 1 and 2. There we go. Got in there. We'll go ahead and stitch our chain 3. And can you see how that looks like a basket weave? All right, so let's turn our work. Double crochet in the next double crochet, and then we're going to front post in the next stitch, front post stitch in the next stitch, back post in the next stitch. There we go. Back post in the next stitch. Now we'll front post in the next, and front post in the next. Double crochet in the next, and double crochet in the next. There it goes. Lost it. Try again. There we go. It's very easy to lose those loops when you're stitching in the back posts. Alrighty, so two front posts, and then we end with 1 double crochet in each one. There we go. Get through that chain 3 and then chain 3. All right, so let's take a look at what we've done so far. Here's our front and here's our back. And you end up with a nice reversible washcloth. Isn't that nice? We have 2 more rows to do and then we'll be done. So now for the last 2 stitches, we're going to go back doing them the way we did the first 2. Or I should say the second 2, because the first one was our row of double crochets. So we're going to turn. We'll stitch 1 double crochet in the next stitch. we're going to stitch a front post in the next 2 stitches. We're going to stitch a back post in the next 2 stitches. We'll stitch a front post in the next 2 stitches. A back post in the next 2 stitches. Alrighty, now we're going to stitch a front post in the next 2. And then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in each of those last 2 stitches. There we go, and chain 3. Alrighty, so now we just have 1 more row to go. Let's do our last row. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and then we're going to double crochet in the next stitch. There we go. Now we're going to stitch a back post in the next 2 stitches. Whoops, get in that loop. There we go. It didn't want to get in that loop. All right, now the next 2 stitches we're going to stitch a front post. Back post stitches in the next 2. Front post in the next 2. Then back post in the next 2 stitches. Then 1 double crochet in those last 2 stitches. 1 and 2. And we're just going to chain 1. And this is the way that it should look at this point. And you can see how the basket weave works on the front and the back. It's completely reversible. You have those nice texture stitches, and it looks really nice. And it's really good for washing with because of the textures. To finish up our washcloth, we're going to single crochet around the 4 sides. We'll put 2 single crochets in the corners, and then I'll show you how to add a little loop if you want it. All right, so let's just work down this first side. When you're working single crochets evenly, you want to try to go in the stitches, not the holes. Now there will be times when you won't have anywhere to put your stitch, and you might need to go in a hole. But for the most part, you want to try to go in the stitches. If you go in one of those holes, you might have a big gaping hole. Like, see, here's a hole, and I might stitch in there. It makes the hole seem bigger. So rather than stitch in that hole, I'll go to the stitch. And this is on the sides of the rows where you're stitching. When you're at the top and the bottom, it's a little bit easier because you can have a place to put your stitches. But when you're stitching on the sides, you don't really have a place to put your stitches. All right, so I'm in the corner. Get that string out of the way there. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and just stitch 2 single crochets right in that corner, and that's just going to help it come around the corner nicely. And now we're at the bottom, and I'm just going to stitch a single crochet in each of those chains across, because that's where we began. That's our beginning chain. And this is another reason why you don't want this beginning chain to be too tight, because remember, we're working with cotton yarn, and cotton yarn really isn't very stretchy like acrylic is. And so you don't want your beginning chain to be too tight and have it pucker up on you at the end of your washcloth there. All right, I'm going to put 2 single crochets, and I'm going to finish single crocheting up the side and across the top, and then I'll show you how to put that loop on. I finished single crocheting around all 4 sides of my washcloth, making sure I put 2 single crochets in the corners. I'm going to join to that first single crochet, and if you do not want a loop on the end of your washcloth like this one, you can just tie that off and weave in your end, but I'm going to make a loop. So I'm going to chain 10 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I like to have a loop on my washcloths to hang it up with, because after I wash my face, I rinse it out and then I hang it up, and then it can dry. Cotton is very absorbent, and it will keep in the makeup and the dirt and the grease off your face if you don't wash them a lot. And once you rinse it, it really needs to be hung up so that the air can dry it out. All right, so I'm going to slip stitch in that first single crochet to form my loop, cut my yarn, and tie that off. Now, the next thing we need to do is weave these ends in, and we have 2 ends to weave in. Something that I have learned when working with cotton yarns is sometimes it's hard to thread the needle. And so what I do is at the end of my yarn, I sort of fan that out a little bit so I can bend that over my needle, and then it makes it a much easier way to put the yarn through. All right, so this is where I put my loop. So I want to make sure I really weave that in good. And even in cotton, when you're weaving in, you want to try to get through the fibers and the stitches, if at all possible, because the more you weave that in through those fibers and stitches, the better it's going to hold. And I want my loop especially to stay put. And I go one way, then I go back the other, and if I have more yarn, I'll do it, 3 or 4 more times, just depending on how much yarn I've left on my needle. All right, so I'm going to cut that off. And then I'll do the same thing on this end. Open that up a little bit, kind of fan it out, bend it over my needle, and thread it. All right. With this one, I'm just going to go back and forth, because this is where we began our chain. And again, I want to go in fibers and stitches. Alrighty. Pull that. Clip it. And now I have a washcloth I can use to wash my face or scrub a pan even. And we've got a set of 3. And wouldn't that be a nice gift? So there's the teal one. I really like this teal one. The others are cute too. But that's our practice project for learning how to do front post and back post double crochet stitches. See you next lesson.